Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to a time when surviving winter didn't mean adjusting the thermostat, but huddling next to a smoky fire and hoping frostbite wouldn't claim your toes. Picture this, you're lying on a lumpy straw-stuffed mattress in a one-room timber hut. The wind whistles through every crooked plank, the air inside colder than you expected, and your breath curls visibly in the dark. You pull a woolen blanket tighter around yourself. It's coarse, scratchy, and never quite thick enough. Honestly, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and the local time you're listening. I'd love to see where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shift slightly, straw crackling beneath you. The mattress pokes through in places, and there's an earthy smell, equal parts hay, sweat, and something small and possibly alive that just scurried past your elbow. But that's normal. It's the 1300s, after all. And this is the only bed in the cottage. You're not alone here. Your spouse is snoring gently beside you, a child clings to your arm like a barnacle, and there's a dull, rhythmic thump as your youngest kicks the wall in his sleep. Privacy. Never heard of her. The whole family sleeps in the same room. Often in the same bed, bundled like medieval sardines. Even grandma, who farts more than she speaks lately. It's winter. The kind of deep, damp cold that seeps into your bones. The hearth's embers are low since no one wants to waste wood, and there's barely enough warmth to fog the air. You clutch the edge of your wool blanket. It's heavy, roughly spun, smells faintly of lanolin, and has never once seen soap. But tonight, it's the closest thing to a lifeline. People often imagine medieval peasants freezing to death in the snow. That's not entirely wrong. But the bigger truth is that you didn't just freeze. You endured. You adapted in quiet, miserable ways. You packed mud into wall cracks. You shared body heat like it was currency. You hibernated indoors for days, moving only when hunger or livestock forced you. Historians still argue whether peasants during the Little Ice Age, roughly 1300 to 1850, actually experienced significantly colder temperatures than today, or if records exaggerated the severity. What's certain is that winters then felt eternal. And with no insulation, single-layer walls, and doors that didn't really seal, even indoors meant mildly less icy. Your cottage is made of wattle and daub, thin sticks interwoven with mud, hay, and animal dung. Surprisingly sturdy, but a complete failure at retaining heat. Wind slips through like gossip in a village market. You've plugged most of the worst gaps with cloth or moss. It's helped. A bit. Maybe. The roof groans as snow piles heavier. Icicles hang outside like sharp reminders that nature's not finished with you yet. You think of the stories you heard as a child, about wolves sneaking into barns, about people who froze in their sleep. You don't believe them anymore. Not entirely. But you do sleep a little closer to the fire now. Just in case, beside the hearth, you've stacked peat, dried mossy bricks of swampy earth used as a substitute for wood. It burns slower, smells worse, but it's fuel. Sort of. Every night, you stack the last glowing embers with fresh peat and whisper a prayer it doesn't smother itself before dawn. You do this while wearing every piece of clothing you own. A linen shirt under a wool tunic, another scratchy layer on top. You've got your hood pulled down to your eyebrows, a scarf across your nose, and you still feel the chill nibbling at your spine. There are no pajamas in this world. Just yesterday's outfit, crusted with sweat and maybe a dash of pig manure. Here's a fun fact, many peasants didn't even sleep lying flat. Mattresses were small, uneven, often tilted. Some curled up in fetal positions for warmth. Others half sat, propped against bundled sacks or the cottage wall. That full stretch you enjoy in your bed tonight. That's a modern luxury, and no, there's no mattress store in town. Your bed was made by you, bundles of straw or reeds sewn together in a wooden frame. Every few weeks, you replace the stuffing because it goes moldy. Or buggy. Or starts to smell like someone's foot fermented in it, speaking of feet. You've wrapped yours in strips of old cloth. Socks are rare. Boots are usually shared or passed down. And even on the coldest nights, there's no guarantee you'll feel your toes come morning. That's why people slept in groups. You didn't cuddle for love. You cuddled to keep your extremities attached. There's a reason folklore and fairy tales are full of hearths. Not just for the aesthetics. The fire was the heart of the home. It cooked your food, boiled your water. Smoked out your lice, hopefully, and most importantly, kept you alive. Just barely, you feel sleep pulling at your eyelids now. Your body aches from hours in the field. Your stomach churns from turnip stew. You're not warm, but you're not as cold as you could be. That's the medieval version of cozy. You pull the wool up higher, shift your weight to avoid a straw knot in your ribs, and listen to the wind clawing at the walls again. Somewhere out there, a fox yips. Closer in, a mouse rustles beneath the hearth. You're drifting now, between dreams of warmer days and the gnawing cold that never quite sleeps. You wake up before the sun, mostly because your nose is frozen, and partly because your foot brushed something suspiciously damp. No, it's not snow. It's condensation from your own breath, gathered and weeping back into the blanket like some medieval version of a humidifier gone rogue. The cold hasn't gone anywhere. It lingers in the corners like a judgmental relative. So, naturally, the first thing you do is reach for your only tunic. Not because you weren't already wearing it last night, but because you're going to need to layer up more. Clothing in your world isn't fashion, it's survival. And forget your favorite hoodies or thermals. You're lucky if your tunic doesn't have holes the size of potatoes. It's dyed a tired brown, because everything fades into brown after a while. Your cloak is made of rough wool, heavier than your regrets, and it smells like it was recently used as a horse blanket. It probably was. There's no outfit rotation. This is it. The outfit. The medieval capsule wardrobe. And before you complain, yes, this includes underthings. If you're lucky, you've got a linen shift to wear underneath, acting as both a base layer and your entire laundry plan. Because here's the thing, washing clothes in winter is, let's say, optional. The local stream is frozen solid, and water is for drinking, not for trying to get pig grease out of your only shirt. Now, onto your feet. Socks. Don't be cute. Socks are a rich person's fantasy. You've got foot wraps, basically long scraps of linen or wool you wrap around and around like sad little foot burritos. They slide off at night, they bunch up when you walk, and they never quite dry once damp. But they're what stands between your toes and frostbite. Your shoes, assuming you have them, are leather. Cracked. Stiff. More like foot buckets than shoes. They're not waterproof. Nothing is. You learn to step carefully, not to avoid slipping, but because every puddle is a personal insult. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants had access to layered clothing like nobles did. Some argue that winter wardrobes were surprisingly advanced, including multiple tunics, cloaks, mittens, and even wool-lined hats. Others suggest peasants rarely had more than a couple garments total, passed down from relatives until they disintegrated mid-harvest. Either way, you make do. You layer. You double up on shirts when possible. You line your boots with straw. You even wrap your legs in strips of cloth tied with cords, essentially inventing leggings centuries too early. And let's not forget the hat. You wear one indoors, outdoors, and probably to your own wedding. It's not a fashion statement. It's the only thing keeping your ears attached, a quirky little footnote of the era. people sometimes stuffed rabbit fur or moss under their tunics for insulation. That's right, medieval peasants, inventors of organic, locally sourced thermal wear. Except without the Instagram posts, your day hasn't even started yet, and already you've added layers like a human onion. The kids are waking up, teeth chattering in unison. The baby's blanket has fallen off and is stiff with cold. You tuck it back around them while trying not to think about the frost crusting on the inside of the window. Breakfast? Not yet. First, you need to light the fire again. The coals are still faintly warm, thank the saints. You add kindling, blow gently, and then comes smoke. A lot of it. Your eyes water. Your nose runs. But eventually, flames crackle and you huddle close, letting the warmth inch its way back into your fingertips. You glance down at your clothes again. They're patched with whatever fabric you could find. Old sacking, pieces of animal hide, even unraveled fishing net. There's no symmetry. No style. But you don't care. It's about covering skin and stopping wind. That's it. Your neighbor brags that he's got a cloak lined with sheepskin. You try not to be jealous. You've heard he skins his own sheep, which is efficient, if mildly terrifying. There's always one person in every village who takes things a little too far. Back inside, the family moves around like a slow-motion snow globe. You help your eldest tie rags around her shoes. She's old enough to start helping with chores, which means trudging through ice to the well and not complaining about it. You glance at your reflection in the metal kettle. It's distorted, smudged, exhausted. Your cheeks are red from cold, your beard is a mess, and your hat's slipping to one side. But you've got your layers. You've got your fire. You've got warmth, sort of. Here's a fun medieval debate. Did peasants really feel cold the way we do, or did their bodies acclimate from birth? Some argue that chronic exposure changed how they experienced discomfort, that what we call unbearable, they just called January. But then again, it's hard to acclimate to waking up with frost on your eyelashes. You move slowly, stiffly. Layers mean safety, but also clumsiness. Everything feels heavier. Getting dressed is like gearing up for war. And yet, this is just another Tuesday. Your mother taught you to sew by the hearth. Patch by patch. Sometimes stitching your tunic while you're still wearing it. She said warmth was earned, not bought. You didn't understand it then, but now, with your knees aching and your hands cracked from cold, you do. Before you head out to tend to the animals, you do a last-minute check. Hat, on. Tunic, belted. Leg wraps, tight. Foot wraps, still holding. You sigh and open the door. The wind greets you like an enemy. It slices across your face and immediately invades the gap between your cloak and your collar. You mutter a curse, tug the fabric tighter, and step into the whitewashed world, and just like that, the layers become your armor. Against the cold. Against hunger. Against the centuries that forgot your name but not your struggle. The door groans as it shuts behind you, sealing your family back inside the thin-walled hut with whatever lingering warmth the fire can muster. You, on the other hand, face the morning chill head-on. The sky is a bleak gray soup, low and heavy, like it's unsure whether to snow or just be disappointing. Your boots crunch through a hardened crust of frost, and your breath fogs in front of you like a ghost trying to give advice. The chickens are complaining already, clucking indignantly beneath a sagging lean-to. You feed them from a woven basket, hands moving stiffly, fingers barely responsive in the cold. It's like playing a game of, how fast can you lose dexterity, and now comes the real challenge, the cow. Or the sheep, or the family pig, whatever livestock you've got squatting in the back of the hut. They're separated from your living quarters by a low partition, or maybe a curtain if you're fancy. They aren't just dinner in progress, they're your central heating system. Yes, this is the grand secret of peasant life, you share your sleeping space with animals. It's less cute barnyard and more live-in farm. You shuffle back inside, push past the kids wrestling over a turnip, and settle near the back corner where the beasts sleep. There's warmth here. And a smell. A very specific smell. But hey, warmth is warmth. The animal bodies radiate heat like sleepy radiators, hooved, hairy, and occasionally flatulent ones. Historians still debate how common this arrangement was across Europe. Some evidence suggests that it was widespread in colder regions, especially where resources were limited. Others argue that in wealthier villages, barns were separate structures, and only the poorest merged indoors with livestock. But here's the thing, even in separate barns, people still slept next to their animals because that's where the heat was. Your pig, bless her, is curled in the straw, snoring like a sawmill. You run a hand over her coarse back, feeling the steady rise and fall of her breath. She's better insulated than you. You try not to take it personally. The family dog is here too, tucked beneath the bench. He's a mangy, loyal mutt, full of fleas and optimism. In the dead of night, he curls up against your legs, helping to keep the worst of the cold at bay. Sometimes you forget he's there until he kicks you in his sleep. You sit for a moment, letting your limbs thaw beside the animals, and realize, this pile of straw, body heat, and shared breath is the warmest part of your world. Romantic? Not at all. Effective? Absolutely. A quirky footnote, in some places, people actually designed their homes to intentionally channel livestock warmth upward. Some alpine cottages had barns on the ground floor and living quarters above, allowing animal heat to rise like nature's underfloor heating. Basically, cows were your central boiler. Back in your cottage, the kids are now fully awake. The oldest is feeding the hearth with twigs while reciting morning prayers. The littlest one is dragging their rag blanket around like a medieval lioness. Everyone is wearing their layers. Everyone still looks cold. The routine begins: milk the animals, prep a meager breakfast, check on the stored root vegetables to make sure none have frozen solid. You knock the ice from the water bucket and use it to splash your face, immediately regretting that decision. Your skin goes numb for the next 15 minutes, but hey, you're technically clean now. You sit down near the fire, letting your cloak steam slightly as it dries. The smell of damp wool fills the room. It's like soup, if soup were made from sheep and regret. Now that you've shared your bed, your heat, and most of your personal space with half the animal kingdom, you might start wondering if there was any privacy. The answer: not really. Sleeping arrangements in the medieval world were utilitarian, not individual. Whole families packed into one bed, sometimes 3 generations deep. Even the wealthier peasants, with separate bed platforms or rope-strung frames, rarely had full rooms to themselves. Curtains? Maybe. But mostly, it was communal survival over solo comfort. You learn to sleep with someone's elbow in your ear and their foot in your ribs, and you just roll with it. Literally, sometimes you even slept in shifts. Someone watched the fire. Someone milked the cow at dawn. Someone tossed and turned, unable to sleep through the sound of Aunt Mildred's heroic snoring. Still, there's an odd sense of comfort in it. You're not alone. You're cold, exhausted, probably lice-ridden, but you're surrounded by breathing, living warmth. There's no silence. There's no darkness without the glow of a coal. There's no isolation, and maybe, just maybe, that's part of how you survived, because when the night is long and the fire is low, and your clothes are damp and your feet are numb, knowing there's another warm body beside you makes all the difference. Whether it's your spouse, your kid, or a particularly affectionate goat, you don't face the cold alone. You exhale, soft and slow, fogging the air. A rooster crows faintly in the distance, muffled by snow, and you realize, this morning, like all the others, you're still here, still wrapped in rags, still chilled to the bone, still surviving. You glance at the wall and notice a patch of it has fallen in again. A few clumps of daub, dried mud, hay, and what is definitely animal dung, have crumbled onto the floor during the night. It's nothing new. The freeze-thaw cycle does this. You sigh, wipe your nose on your sleeve, and grab a fresh handful of the same mix from a bucket near the door. Yes, you're patching your house with poop. Welcome to the realities of medieval insulation. Wattle and daub may sound rustic and charming, but it leaks heat like a bucket full of holes. So you do what any reasonable peasant does, you reinforce it. Straw, mud, and animal waste are pressed into the cracks, forming a patchwork of protection against the cruel wind. It's an art form, really. If by art you mean please let this gunk freeze in place before the next storm rolls in. You press the new daub into place with your bare hands. No gloves. It's faster this way. The mix is cold, squishy, and smells like it was alive last week. Which, let's be honest, it probably was. The wall thanks you with a moist squelch. You nod, satisfied, you step back inside, shivering now that your hands are soaked. The heat from the fire is a gentle wave of mercy. You rub your fingers together, trying to bring them back to life. The fire crackles, casting flickers across the rough wooden beams above your head. They're soot blackened from years of smoke curling up from the hearth. You're not sure they've ever not been black, but here's the thing, this smell, this smoke, this is warmth. You add more fuel to the fire. You don't use good firewood. That's for lords and monasteries. You use what you can get, twigs, dry dung, bits of broken fence. Anything that'll burn and not choke you entirely. The air turns thick, acrid. Your eyes sting again, but the heat spreads. Slowly. Historians still argue whether peasant homes actually had chimneys during the early medieval period. Some did, sure, but many had simple holes in the roof or none at all. The smoke just gathered up near the rafters until it finally drifted out. Or didn't. In homes like yours, soot is part of the decor. You wipe it off the cooking pot before stirring breakfast. You ignore the layer gathering on the inside of the window. You occasionally wake up coughing from it. But what can you do? Fire is non-negotiable. There's a reason medieval people called the heart of the home. It was literally the center of life. It cooked your food, dried your clothes, and most importantly, kept you from becoming a human icicle. Every bit of heat had to be earned and hoarded, a quirky fact. In some regions, people would bury embers in ash to keep them alive overnight. These little fire nests could be revived in the morning with some breath and careful coaxing. It's basically the medieval version of putting your laptop to sleep instead of shutting it down. You remember those mornings when the fire died entirely. The room was so cold you could see your breath and your resentment. Your fingers were too stiff to strike a spark. That's why now, even half asleep, you check the coals. You feed the fire before it begs. Your home doesn't just depend on heat. It depends on layers. Walls are layered with anything you can stick in them, animal hides, moss, rags, flattened bundles of hay. The gaps between beams are filled with desperation and hope. You sometimes drape blankets across doorways. Hang rugs on the walls. Not because it looks nice, but because it blocks the wind. There's no such thing as wasted fabric. Even your neighbor's old grain sack became a window covering last winter. Worked better than glass, if you ask him. And your windows? Ha! That's a good joke. Maybe you have one, maybe two. They're small, made of stretched animal bladder or thin horn slices to let in some light. Glass is for cathedrals and castles. You've got a hole covered with parchment, and you're grateful for it. You sit near the fire now, wrapping your cloak tighter. The warmth reaches your knees. That's about it. The rest of you is still losing the daily battle with the cold, but it's losing more slowly now. Sometimes, when the snow piles high outside and the animals fall asleep in their straw, you daydream about having a real hearth. Stone. Big enough to sit in, like the Lord's kitchen hearth. You saw it once, when you delivered grain. It was bigger than your entire house. You remember the heat washing over you. The way it hugged every corner of the room. The cook wore short sleeves in winter. You almost cried from jealousy, but then again, the Lord doesn't patch his walls with manure. He doesn't warm his toes beside a pig. He doesn't listen to the wind creak through the ceiling beams every night and pray they hold one more season. No, this is your warmth. It's gritty. It's smoky. It's loud with crackling wood and coughing children. But it's yours. You lean forward, feeding another dry clump of fuel into the flame. It flares up, glowing red and gold. You close your eyes, letting the light dance behind your lids. And for just a moment, one breath, one heartbeat, you feel something like comfort. The fire crackles behind you as you step away, its warmth lingering on your back like the last fading embrace of summer. You carry an armload of kindling, scraps of dry branches, brittle twigs, even some splinters hacked from a broken fence post, and dump them in a pile near the hearth. That'll have to last the day. You wish you had more wood. Real wood. Thick logs that burn slow and long. But you're not exactly rolling in forests. The Lord owns most of the land, including the woods, and cutting down trees without permission is a punishable offense. As in, actual punishment. The kind that involves a fine or even a flogging. So you scavenge. What burns? Almost everything. You've experimented. Bones, dried weeds, twisted roots. Animal dung again. The stuff you collect from your own animals is lovingly dried in the sun and stacked like cakes, ready to burn. It smells about how you'd expect. But in winter, even stink has its charm. The irony is that fire is your lifeline, and it barely wants to be friends with you. It's moody. It doesn't start when you need it to. It burns out early. It coughs smoke into your eyes like it resents your very existence. And when you really need it, for example when your baby's got a fever and the wind outside sounds like it's chewing the house, it decides to throw a tantrum and die mid-burn, you learn how to coax it. You build your hearth like a ritual. Biggest pieces at the back. Twigs in the middle. Dung cakes angled just so. You blow carefully, not too hard. You whisper to it like it's alive. Because in a way, it is. Historians still debate whether the average peasant household maintained a continuous fire throughout the winter months or let it go out overnight to conserve fuel. Some evidence suggests families did everything possible to keep embers alive, hiding them under ash, feeding them late into the night, even assigning someone to stay awake on rotation. Others argue that fires died routinely, and relighting them was just part of the cold, joyless morning ritual. Either way, you've lived both. Sometimes it burns through till dawn. Sometimes you wake up to a cold hearth in a colder room. You once heard of a village woman who claimed her fire hadn't gone out in 5 years. People called her a witch, of course. But really, they were just jealous. There's a saying in your village, fire doesn't love the lazy. If it goes out, it's your fault. If it smokes too much, you built it wrong. If it cracks a stone in your hearth, that's the saints punishing your arrogance. You develop a relationship with your fire. It's tense, codependent, and weirdly emotional. You try not to rely on it too much. You sleep wrapped in so many layers you rustle like dry leaves. You line your children up like sausages beside the hearth. You bury your feet in straw. Anything to cheat the cold when the flames start to fade. Here's a quirky little tidbit. Some medieval folks believed that fire smoke could ward off spirits or at least mosquitoes. Not exactly useful in winter, but it's comforting to think that the smoke curling in your rafters is scaring off ghosts instead of just staining your ceiling. You glance up. Yep, black as midnight. And the smell, if warmth had a flavor, this would be it. Smoky, thick, with a hint of whatever you burned last. You recognize dung. Dry thistle, and something you really hope wasn't part of your boot, you rub your hands together again. They're red, chapped, and cracked. You've got the hands of someone who fights the elements, loses daily, and still shows up for round 2. Your nails are jagged, and there's soot under every one. But you can feel them now, at least. That's an improvement. The fire sputters as a fresh twig catches flame. It glows. It glows. It's not dramatic. There are no roaring infernos here. Just a steady orange light and a heat you can barely feel unless you're pressed up against the stone hearth like a desperate lizard. You remember the time you tried to build a bigger fire. It felt glorious for about 5 minutes. The house was almost warm. Until the smoke backed up and you had to fling the door open and cough like your lungs were on strike. The lesson? Fire gives, but it also takes, so now, you keep it small. Manageable. Just enough to heat the stew pot, warm your fingers, and trick your brain into thinking your toes might thaw eventually. You sit near it now, watching shadows flicker across the floor. Your daughter rolls a rock in her hand near the fire, tracing shapes in the ash. Your son wraps his arms around the dog, who grunts but doesn't move. Everyone is drawn to the warmth, like pilgrims to a holy relic. It's not just about temperature. It's about hope. The fire feels alive. It gives your bleak, gray morning a pulse. It says, you made it through another night. You can try again today. That's all winter really is. Trying again. One more patch of wall. One more layer. One more fire, because the cold is coming back tonight, you know it, and you'll be ready. You don't remember the last time you were truly clean. Not just wiped your face with a damp cloth, clean, but that deep, scrubbed, fresh linen kind of clean. You suspect it was sometime last summer, before the frost arrived and the stream froze into a jagged, useless ribbon of ice, and yet here you are, wearing the same tunic, the same trousers, the same everything, again. Because in winter, changing your clothes is not just inconvenient, it's unwise. Every layer you wear is precious. Every extra thread holds in a sliver of heat. So when bedtime arrives, you don't peel anything off. You don't slip into something more comfortable. You collapse in whatever you wore to dig ditches, herd sheep, or haul stones that day. That's your sleepwear. Congratulations, you try not to think too hard about it. The dirt. The smell. The vague stickiness. There's no point. If you change into something clean, it'll just be dirty again tomorrow. Worse, if you take it off at night, it might freeze before morning. Yes, that's a thing. You once left a damp linen shirt hanging on a peg overnight. Woke up to find it stiff as a board. Snapped in half like a piece of wood. You tried to bend it and the sleeve just cracked. So now, everything stays on. Historians still argue how often medieval peasants bathed. Some evidence points to frequent washing, at least hands, faces, and feet. Communal baths existed, especially in towns. But during winter, bathing dropped off sharply. Voluntarily getting wet when your house is colder than a church crypt is basically inviting death in for tea. And laundry? Forget it. Washing clothes was a full-day ordeal, involving buckets of water you had to heat manually, heavy scrubbing with harsh lye soap, and then trying to dry them in air that couldn't toast bread. So unless something was truly offensive, say, soiled beyond redemption, it just got a good shake, a brush off, and maybe a few hours near the fire, you develop a tolerance for your own smell. And everyone else's. You smell like wool, earth, sweat, and occasionally turnips. That's just the family fragrance. You once sat beside a noble who smelled of rosewater and beeswax and nearly passed out from the contrast. You're not proud of it. But you also can't risk getting sick. And that's the real enemy in all this, not just discomfort but illness, because if you fall ill, the cold becomes 10 times worse. You remember last winter. Your wife caught something, coughing, wheezing, wrapped in blankets so thick she looked like a walking quilt. You kept the fire burning night and day. You gave her the only clean rag for her forehead. You even warmed wine over the hearth, pouring it into her mouth in small sips. She made it. But just barely. And you remember how close that line was. A quirky fact: in some regions, people believed illness was caused by cold entering the body through the feet. So peasants would wrap their toes in garlic, onion skins, or even animal fat before bed. Did it work? Doubtful. But desperate times call for slippery solutions. Tonight, you lie down again in your stiff, smoky tunic. You haven't changed in days. Your underclothes are itchy. Your legs are covered in a patchwork of wool wraps and linen ties. You're not comfortable, but you're insulated. Comfort is for summer. Warmth is for survival. You settle onto the straw mattress, brushing off the worst of the chaff and praying nothing wriggly has moved in during the day. Your daughter curls beside you, and the smell of her damp cloak mingles with yours. You don't even flinch anymore. Sleep comes slowly. Your legs twitch from the day's labor. Your back aches. Your chest feels tight, like it's trying to keep the cold out with sheer stubbornness. But your eyes grow heavy, and the weight of your layers holds you in place like the earth itself is hugging you. Sometimes, you dream of floating. Of slipping into a warm bath. Of soft, clean sheets. Of waking up in linen that smells of sunshine and lavender instead of goats and desperation. But even those dreams are hazy now. You've been sleeping in your work clothes for so long that your dreams have started wearing them too. You stir once more before sleep fully claims you, pulling the edge of your cloak tighter around your neck. Outside, the wind presses against the walls like it wants in. It always wants in. But tonight, your layers hold, and so do you. You wake up in the dark. It's that particular kind of darkness that feels cold, not just absent of light, but full of quiet warnings. Your breath fogs the air before your face, a steady rhythm of white puffs. For a moment, you're disoriented. Is it morning already? No, it's sometime in the early hours, the deepest part of the night when your body wants most to sleep and the cold wants most to remind you who's in charge. Your feet are the first to complain. You shift under the covers, trying to tuck them deeper beneath the bundled wool. Too late. They're numb. Not just chilly, but wooden, as if they've been dipped in ice and left there to harden. You press your soles together, hoping friction will help. It doesn't. You slide one hand down to rub them, grimacing as your fingertips make contact. They're stiff. Slightly damp. If you weren't half asleep, you'd be more alarmed. But this isn't the first time. You've had nights like this before. Nights when the fires died down to the barest red glow, and even the pig has rolled away from you in search of a warmer corner. You sit up slowly, joints creaking like a door hinge, and swing your legs over the side of the bed. The floor is hard-packed earth, cold as stone. You shuffle toward the hearth, wrap still tangled around your legs, blanket dragging behind you like a defeated cape. You kneel at the edge, fingers searching for heat. You find it. Barely, one ember, glowing like a stubborn eye, buried in gray ash. You grab the stick you left earlier and nudge it gently. A spark jumps. You blow carefully, lips chapped. More spark. You add a twig. Another. You're not trying to make a fire. Just enough flame to wake your toes. Historians still debate how many medieval households had someone designated as the night tender, a person responsible for keeping the fire alive and tending any livestock that stirred. Some say it was the eldest woman. Others suggest it rotated among adults. But in poor families, it was simple. Whoever woke up coldest did the work. Tonight, that's you. You warm your hands first, cupping the ember like it's sacred. Then you stretch out your legs and lower your feet close. Not too close. You've learned that lesson. Burned toes are not better than frozen ones. But just enough to feel the blood stirring. You stay like that for a long while, rocking gently, mumbling a half-prayer to Saint Blaise or whoever is on warmth duty tonight. A quirky fact, some peasants used to place heated stones under their blankets, pulled from the fire and wrapped in cloth. It worked sometimes. Other times it just scorched a hole in your only blanket. You tried that last winter. Didn't end well. You think about crawling back into bed, but now your stomach grumbles. Of course it does. Because nothing says middle of the night like hunger that won't wait for dawn. You dig around the food basket by the door. Not much left. A crust of coarse rye bread, rock hard and slightly green on one edge. You break it with effort and pop a bit into your mouth. It tastes like sleep deprivation and mildew. But it's something. You chew slowly, watching the embers glow. The room is still. The fire crackles, just a little. Someone turns in bed. Probably your eldest. The dog shifts and sighs. Outside, the wind rattles something loose on the roof. Your toes are starting to tingle now. The pins and needles stage. Painful, but also a promise that blood is moving again. You think of your uncle. The one who lost 2 toes last winter. They just turned black and fell off, like spoiled fruit. No one talked about it much. They just called it the rot. You check your own feet again. Pale. Dry. But still there, you return to bed like a thief. Quiet. Careful. Everyone else is still wrapped in their patchwork nests of rags and limbs. You slide back into your spot, disturbing only a few squeaky straw stems. It's warmer now. Not warm, but better. Your cloak still holds some fire heat. Your feet still hold a memory of ember glow. You close your eyes. You try not to think about your toes. You try not to think about how many more nights like this are left before spring. You just let your breath return to its rhythm. Your body returns to stillness. And the cold, always watching and always pressing, eases its grip for a while. You made it through the coldest part of the night. Morning is still far off, but your fire lives, and so do you. You wake up properly this time, not because you feel rested. Don't be ridiculous. But because the noise has started. A soft chorus of chickens clucking, a cough from your neighbor's son in the adjoining cottage, and the unmistakable groan of someone trying to force movement into stiff limbs. Your eyes open to a ceiling of soot-streaked beams. Your mouth feels dry and sour, like you spent the night chewing wool. You probably did. Your cloak is half in your mouth, soaked with drool and smoke, and, is that goat hair? You stretch, gently. You learned long ago not to go full medieval yoga at sunrise. Your back isn't made for that kind of ambition. Every joint pops. Your knees crack like someone stepped on twigs. But there's a bigger problem, your stomach. It growls like a wounded bear. And with good reason. Dinner last night was boiled barley and half a turnip. Again. You tried to convince yourself the bitter taste meant it was medicinal. But no. It was just slightly rotten. You shuffle toward the fire pit, now only smoldering in sullen silence. You stoke it without even thinking. Embers. Twig. Blow. Twigs again. It's become automatic. A dance of survival you've perfected through too many cold dawns. Once it's sputtering to life, you move to the food sack in the corner. You rummage. Root vegetables. Always root vegetables. A few wrinkled carrots. One onion that looks like it's plotting something. And, the prize, half a stale heel of bread, no butter. No salt. No jam. Just a grayish hunk of rye so dense it could double as a weapon. You dunk it straight into the warm pot of leftover stew. If you can call 2 turnips floating in their own shame stew. And chew slowly. Historians often romanticize the simple peasant diet, describing it as earthy and hearty. Which is adorable. Because in truth, it was monotony. Laced with mild nutrient deficiency and the ever-present fear of food running out before spring, you ate what you had. That meant grains. Rye, barley, oats. Usually boiled into pottage. Maybe a hunk of cheese if the cow had been kind. Vegetables, especially in winter, were the ones that didn't rot easily. Cabbage. Onion. Turnip. Always turnip. Your dreams are haunted by turnip meat. Rare. A luxury. Slaughtering an animal meant you either had a festival to celebrate, or no feed left to get it through the cold. Either way, not an everyday thing. You might get broth. Sometimes a sliver of fatback. The pigs eat better, honestly. You once ate squirrel. It tasted like shame, and drinks. Ale. Not the fancy pub kind. Watery, weak, fermented by someone who last washed their hands in 1347. But it was safer than water, most days. Your stream has a suspicious film on it lately. And there's that story about the tanner's apprentice who grew a third nipple from drinking downstream of the mill. Breakfast, then, is more a matter of habit than hunger. You eat because you must. Because your body won't make it through the next labor shift on stomach fumes and frost. You chew. Slowly. Methodically. You watch the firelight bounce off the kettle. You listen to your children whispering, too tired to argue yet. And you savor the one warm thing in this room. The steam curling from your crude wooden bowl. Quirky footnote of the day: some peasants used to store slices of bread under their beds to age it before eating. Not for flavor, but so it was harder and lasted longer. Medieval logic says if it's already stale, it can't go more stale. You finish your breakfast, such as it is, and lick your fingers. There's no waste here. Not a crumb. Not a drop. Even the turnip skin bits floating in the bottom of the bowl get swallowed down. Your stomach groans again, but it's quieter now. More a complaint than a protest. You sit for a moment, letting the heat return to your chest, and look out the small window. A patched hole covered in stretched hide. It's translucent at best. But you can tell the sky is lighter now. That means the workday begins soon. Your body already knows. It feels it in your legs. In your arms. In your shoulders, which carry the weight of everything, both physical and emotional. You don't dread it, exactly. Work is life. The rhythm of it keeps you sane. But there's always that moment, that breath, when the cold outside calls again and you have to answer. Wrapped in rags. Fueled by turnips. And dragging a belly that never quite feels full, but before you move, you take a final moment here. With the fire. With your bowl. With your little bit of silence before the world starts asking things of you again, because this was your feast, this was your comfort, this was what kept you alive, and now, it's time to get up and go earn your next one. You pull on your boots, more like leathery sacks with ambitions, and fasten the twine around your ankles. The leather is still damp from yesterday. You don't ask why. It's better not to know. Outside, the wind moans like someone offended it, and you brace yourself for the sprint across the yard to the barn. Well, barn is a generous term. It's more of a crooked lean-to, slumped like it's giving up on life, huddled against the side of your cottage for warmth. But inside is where the warmth actually lives. Four-legged, hay-munching, occasionally farting warmth, you slide the door open. It creaks like a crypt. A gentle wave of scent hits you, wet straw, old dung, and animal breath. Not pleasant, exactly, but familiar. You step inside, already feeling a shift in temperature. They're all here. The cow, the goats, the chickens. Everyone's huddled close, sharing heat like they know the price of going it alone. The cow raises her head and blinks slowly at you. A judgmental blink. She knows you're late. She doesn't care about your frostbitten toes. You kneel beside her and run your hand along her side. She's warm. Genuinely warm. You can feel the slow engine of her life moving under that thick hide. Her breath mists the air like a dragon who's just too tired to roar, and so you do what every smart peasant has always done. You stay here, you bring a stool. You sit. Not for work. Milking comes later. For now, you're just stealing body heat from a large, indifferent herbivore. This wasn't plan B. This was the plan. When your house is made of sticks and optimism, and your fire needs feeding every hour like a newborn, the animals are your heating system. Their breath warms the air. Their bodies warm the straw. And their presence reminds you that you're not the only one trying to make it through the winter. Historians often note that livestock sharing space with humans wasn't purely for convenience. It was a thermal strategy. In fact, in some alpine homes, animals were kept on the lower floor while humans lived above, allowing rising body heat to warm the dwelling. Not glamorous, but deeply practical. Here in your small patch of muddy earth, the arrangement is more intimate. The chickens roost on overhead beams. One of them pooped on your hat last week. You wore it anyway. There's a rooster too. He's a jerk. Looks you dead in the eye every morning and screams like he's announcing the end of days. You've named him Gregory. He does not respond to kindness. The goats nuzzle at your legs. One chews absent-mindedly on your cloak. You're too tired to care. You let her. It's not like she can make it worse. You look around the barn. There's hay piled in one corner, some of it moldy. There are feed sacks against the wall, their sides gnawed through by mice. You've set traps, of course. The mice ignore them. You're starting to suspect they're mocking you. You take a handful of hay and press it behind your neck, leaning back against the cow like she's a furry armchair. You sigh. This is the warmest you've been in hours. A quirky fact: some peasants in northern Europe kept a hearth pig, a smaller pig allowed to roam inside the house during winter. Not just for scraps, but for cuddles. That's right. Medieval people invented the emotional support pig. You think about letting your pig in. She's outside, sulking in her pen. But the last time she came in, she ate half a shoe and knocked over your stew pot. You're still debating whether that was a net gain. Your daughter calls from the doorway. It's time to start chores. The sun's risen, technically. A pale smear of light behind thick clouds. You sigh again and stand up, joints protesting. You pat the cow's side. She ignores you, of course. She's the queen of this barn, and you are but her humble space heater. You grab the bucket. Milking comes first. You settle into the routine. Pull, squirt, pause. Pull, squirt, sigh. The rhythm is almost meditative. Your breath matches the tempo. For a moment, you forget the cold. You forget your sore back. You forget Gregory, but only for a moment. He screams again. You gather the eggs from the hens next. A meager haul, 3, maybe 4. Enough for a small breakfast if you stretch it with oats. You're grateful. And you tell the hens as much. They blink at you like you've offended them with your gratitude. The animals don't ask for much. Just food, shelter, and the occasional scratch behind the ears. In return, they give you warmth. Not affection. Not loyalty. Just the raw, steady furnace of their bodies and breath. It's a fair trade. Back inside the house, your family is stirring. The fire has caught again. The room feels alive. You carry the eggs like treasures, set them gently beside the hearth, and as you peel off your cloak, shake the straw from your sleeves, and sit back down on your wooden stool, you feel something strange. You feel grateful, not because life is easy, not because you're warm, but because, somehow, the cold hasn't beaten you yet, and you know, deep in your tired bones, that it won't, not today. Later, you're back in bed. Not to sleep, but to rest. Just for a moment. The kind of tired that soaks into your bones doesn't disappear with a few deep breaths. It lingers. And so you lie there, eyes half closed, listening. It's quiet now. Almost too quiet, but then it starts, a low, rhythmic creak from the rafters. A soft patter outside, like claws on packed snow. The wind gusts, and the thatch above your head sighs. You hear something shift behind the walls. Something you hope is a mouse. Could be a rat. Might be a very cold squirrel. You've heard these noises before. You tell yourself they're normal, but tonight they're louder. Your daughter stirs next to you, murmuring something in her sleep. One of the goats gives a sharp snort from the barn side of the room. You hold your breath and listen harder. There it is again. A faint thump from outside. Then a scraping sound, just the wind. Just the wind, you say it like a prayer. Medieval nights are not silent. They never were. With no city hum, no cars, no electric buzz, you hear everything. The house creaks like it's telling old stories. The trees outside snap and groan under the cold. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hoots. Then silence again. A silence so deep it feels like it's pressing against your eardrums, and then the wolves begin, one howl. Far off. Echoing through the forest like a question, then another. Closer. You shiver, instinctively drawing the blanket tighter. You've never seen a wolf. Not up close. But you've seen what's left of sheep who strayed too far. You've heard the stories. About wolves in the woods, wolves in the fields, wolves on roads that used to be safe. Historians still argue whether wolves were truly as dangerous as the legends say. Some believe their numbers were exaggerated to justify hunting campaigns or royal forest patrols. Others insist they were a real, nightly threat to livestock. And occasionally, to lonely travelers who didn't make it home before dark. You believe the latter. There's something primal about hearing a howl on a freezing night. It speaks directly to the old part of your brain. The part that remembers you are, in the grand hierarchy of nature, very much made of meat. A quirky belief from your village says if you hear a wolf howl 3 times in one night, it means someone nearby will die before morning. You're not superstitious. But tonight, you count each call like tally marks in a ledger. Outside, the wind picks up again. The shutters rattle. A branch scrapes across the roof with a sound that's almost like footsteps. You try not to think about demons. Or spirits. Or the dead, because you've also heard those stories, about things in the night that aren't wolves. About the wild hunt, ghostly riders who sweep across the sky collecting souls. About fey creatures who snatch sleeping children, replacing them with straw dolls. About witches who slip through keyholes in the form of smoke. It's not that you believe. It's just that. You don't not believe. Not when it's this dark. Not when the wind sounds like voices whispering just beyond the door. Your dog growls suddenly, a low, uncertain sound. Everyone in the bed stiffens. You hold your breath. The goat bleats once, nervously. Then silence again. Nothing moves. You wait, 1 minute, 2, you let out a slow, shaky breath. The dog settles back down, curling tighter. You reach out and rest your hand on your daughter's back. She's still asleep. Thank the saints. You glance at the door. It's barred. Not that it would stop anything determined. But it gives the illusion of safety. And sometimes that's all you need. You roll to your other side, facing the wall now. The rough wood is cold against your cheek. But the sounds have faded. The wolves are quiet. The wind's calmed, the fire pops gently in the hearth. You listen to the breathing around you. Soft. Steady. You close your eyes again, not to sleep. Not yet. Just to rest, just until morning, because if anything really dangerous wanted to get in, it already would've. The silence finally settles, that thick, heavy kind of silence coats everything, your ears, your breath, even the flickering light of the hearth. The wind outside no longer rattles the shutters. The wolves, if they're still out there, have stopped their performance. And the dog? He's snoring softly again, twitching now and then in some dream where he's much braver than he is in real life. You lie still, staring at the rafters. They vanish into the dark, but you can picture them from memory. Thick beams, knotted and slightly warped, blackened from years of smoke curling toward the roof. One has a crack running down the middle, a reminder of the storm 3 winters ago. It hasn't fallen yet. So you trust it, then the bell tolls, one long, low note. Faint but clear. It cuts through the early morning hush like a solemn announcement. It is time. It comes from the church on the hill, barely visible through the trees on a clear day. A squat, stone building with walls 2 feet thick and a bell tower so crooked that even the ravens hesitate to perch on it. But the bell still rings. That means you're still part of the world. It tolls again. 2 notes now. A slow, steady rhythm marking the sacred hours. Matins, perhaps. Or lauds. You never keep the hours precisely. You just know the sound. And it always feels older than you, older than the village, older than the cold. Your wife stirs beside you. She murmurs something soft, part prayer, part dream. The baby shifts in her arms. You don't speak. No one does. The bell is not something you talk through. It isn't just a clock, it's a lifeline. In a world where time is measured by the sun and the seasons, the church bell becomes the heartbeat. It tells you when to pray, when to work, when to rest. And more than anything, it reminds you that someone out there is still awake, still watching the sky, still keeping track. Historians have long debated how strictly peasants followed the canonical hours. Some say it was meant for monks and clergy. Others argue that in deeply religious communities, even the youngest child grew up aware of the tolls. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. You don't always kneel when it rings, but you always notice, and sometimes, in the dark, when sleep has slipped away and your feet still ache from the cold, that bell becomes a comfort. Not because it offers warmth, but because it offers structure. You rise slowly, careful not to wake the others. You pull your cloak around your shoulders and sit by the fire. There's not much left of it now, only red glowing coals. Huddled together like gossiping elders. You feed them a few scraps of twig and coax them with your breath. It's quiet work. Almost reverent. Like tending a shrine, the bell tolls again. You whisper a prayer, not aloud. Just inside your head. Something simple. Not even real words, just the idea of thanks. Thanks that the roof still holds. Thanks that the baby didn't cough all night. Thanks that your feet, while still attached, seem to be mostly unfrozen, the little habit you've kept. When the bell rings at night, you count to 10 and make a wish. It's not something the church approves, obviously, but your grandmother swore it worked if your heart was quiet enough when you asked. You never asked for much, a warmer spring, a longer harvest, fewer rats in the barley. Sometimes you wished for new boots, though you suspect that wish might require a much louder bell. The fire starts to flicker again, casting light on the stone hearth. You look down at your hands. Cracked knuckles. Dirt beneath the nails. A scar from last harvest, still pink. You flex your fingers slowly, feeling each joint ease in the warmth. Another bell rings in the distance. A different tone. A smaller chapel, perhaps. Or maybe a handheld bell, used by a priest walking the lanes in the dark, offering prayers for the dead. Your father once told you that when 2 bells toll in one night, it means a soul is passing. You glance toward the door. You listen. Nothing. Just the wind, shifting gently again. Maybe it was your imagination. you reach for the kettle resting near the fire. The water inside is lukewarm, but you take a sip anyway. It tastes of smoke and metal, but it's wet, and that's enough. You sit for a long time, not thinking, not praying, just being, wrapped in layers, wrapped in quiet, listening to the sound of the last bell fade into the hills. You close your eyes, not to sleep, just to remember that, for now, this moment is still yours. You need to go outside, it's not up for debate. Nature doesn't wait for sunrise, and neither does your bladder. You ease yourself up from your stool by the hearth, your joints protesting like a rusty gate. You wrap your cloak tighter, grabbing a handful of straw to stuff behind your collar as an extra wind blocker. It won't help much, but you do it anyway. The door creaks open with effort. Cold air rushes in instantly, wrapping around your legs like a wet rope. Your breath puffs out, visible and immediate. The frost has returned, painting every surface in ghostly silver. The sky is just beginning to fade from pitch to charcoal. Still early. Still dark, you step outside and brace yourself. The ground crunches beneath your boots, frozen dirt, brittle twigs, last season's leaves locked in icy death poses. Your path to the edge of the yard is well worn, trodden by generations of sleepy peasants just like you. There's a bush you use, or sometimes the fence. It depends on how bad the wind is. Tonight, you pick the bush, you finish your business quickly. There's no lingering. The cold encourages efficiency. And then you stop, you're not ready to go back inside just yet. Something about the air is so sharp it feels like you could snap it in half. You look up. The stars are faint, fighting the pale wash of coming dawn, but you see a few. There's Orion. And maybe the North Star. Though you're never sure, you exhale slowly. Steam curls from your mouth, then fades. You're not alone, you spot him near the edge of the woods. A shadow at first, then clearer. Not a threat. It's Willem, the night watcher. He stands still, wrapped in 3 cloaks and wearing a hat shaped like a slumped mushroom. He's got a lantern dangling from one hand, casting more shadow than light. You raise a hand. He doesn't wave back, but nods slightly. An acknowledgement that you are both real, both awake, both cold. Willem is one of the few who stays up through the night. His job isn't official. No one pays him. But he's old and restless and says the night tells more truth than the day. He walks the village perimeter, checking barns, watching for wolves or thieves or worse. Sometimes, he sings to himself. Low and rough. Sometimes you think it's prayer. Sometimes it sounds like he's arguing with ghosts. Historians aren't quite sure how common night watchers like Willem were in medieval villages. Some claim they were part of organized communal defense systems, taking turns to patrol during hard winters. Others believe the role was more informal. Old men, widows, insomniacs with sharp ears and nowhere to go, you're just grateful he's there, because out here, in the half-light and the bitter silence, the world feels bigger, wilder. You swear the trees breathe. You swear the dark watches, and when Willem is out here too, it feels less haunted. A quirky bit of lore says that if you meet your own shadow walking alone at night, it means you'll die before the next full moon. Which is deeply unhelpful when every surface is lit by flickering lanterns and moonlight tricks. You glance at the snow under your feet, just to be sure. One shadow. Just yours. Good, you start to head back, then pause. Something moved behind the fence. You freeze. But then it's just a fox, slipping between trees like smoke on legs. It stops for a heartbeat, staring at you with amber eyes. You nod, politely. It doesn't nod back. Rude, the fox disappears, and you're alone again. You reach the door, push it open, and step back inside. The air in the cottage feels warmer now. Not because it is, but because you remember what cold truly feels like. You're grateful for the fire, for the thick air scented with smoke and goat. You're grateful even for the child who just rolled over and kicked you in the shin without waking. You sit again, you press your hands to the sides of your mug. It's empty, but still warm, and for just a moment, you wonder what Willem hears out there in the night. What secrets the darkness whispers to those who stay awake long enough to listen. But that's not your burden. You'll sleep soon, you've earned it, and if something knocks in the dark, well, Willem's out there, lantern in hand. You don't remember falling asleep again, but the next thing you know, your chest is tight and you're coughing into the straw-stuffed edge of your blanket. The sound echoes in the cramped cottage, followed by a rustle of stirring bodies and one disgruntled bleat from the goat. Great. You sit up slowly, rubbing your chest with a hand that feels too big for your own skin. The cough rattles your ribs a little. It's dry, sharp, and familiar. It's the same kind of cough your neighbor's boy had last winter. Before he stopped coughing. And started wheezing. And then stopped doing much of anything. You pull your cloak tighter. Your breath catches again, and this time the cough comes back with a vengeance. Your daughter stirs, eyes barely open, mumbling through sleep. You okay, Papa? You nod, the kind of nod that says absolutely not, but we're pretending today. She rolls over and drifts off again, the fire's gone low. Again. You reach for the twig pile, hands trembling slightly now. The cold is deeper this morning. Not the usual aching in your bones kind. No, this one starts in your lungs and wraps around your ribs like a wet rope. You manage a few sparks. Just enough flame to warm the base of the kettle and cast long shadows across the wall. Historians still argue about how common respiratory illnesses were in medieval Europe. Not just colds and coughs, but pneumonia, bronchitis, and even tuberculosis-like infections. Most agree that indoor smoke, poor ventilation, and constant dampness were a toxic cocktail for the lungs. But no one knows exactly how many people the winters took quietly. You shift closer to the fire, your knees nearly in the ashes. Your face is flushed, but your fingertips are still numb. That horrible paradox when your body feels hot and cold at the same time, like it can't decide which way it's dying. Someone hands you a cup of water. Your wife. She doesn't speak, but she sits beside you and lays a hand gently on your back. Just the weight of it. Steady, silent, solid, you sip. The water is tepid. Slightly smoky. Still tastes like kindness, a quirky footnote of the time. When peasants got sick, one of the common remedies was hot ale boiled with herbs and a little bit of butter, if you could afford it. Butter was thought to lubricate the lungs. You tried that once. It just made your stomach more upset than your lungs were soothed. You glance toward the shelf where your medicine sits. A pot of something sticky and brown, passed down from your mother. Honey, mustard seed, maybe tree bark. No one remembers anymore. You lick a finger, dip it in, and suck it slowly. It tastes like warm glue and burnt wood. You cough again anyway. Outside, the light is growing. Your son slips out the door with the pail. His boots crunch the frost as he heads to the well. You watch him through the cracks, envying his strength. He's young enough that the cold doesn't cling to him like it does to you. You remember when your body used to bounce back. When a cough was just a cough and not a premonition. Now, it lingers. There's work today. There's always work. You can't be sick. You can't stay in bed. You can't, so you don't. You rise, slowly, with your wife's hand steadying your elbow. You bundle up again. Layer over layer, each one a barrier between you and whatever thing inside you is trying to claw its way out. You step outside, and the wind hits you like a slap. You cough. Again, but you keep walking, because the field needs tending. The animals need feeding. And you still have mouths to keep warm and full. Including your own. You make it halfway to the fence before stopping, hands on your knees, breath fogging in rapid bursts. Your lungs rattle. You stand there, bent over like a question mark, until the world stops spinning, then you straighten. And keep going, because in the medieval world, sickness doesn't pause the cold. Or the hunger. Or the wolves, you do the work anyway, because no one else can, and the fire still needs feeding. You're back inside before midday. Coughing again, of course. Your boots dripping from the melted frost and your hands so cold they don't seem to belong to you anymore. You kick off the stiff leather, nearly losing a toe in the process, and collapse onto the bench near the hearth. It's warmer now, thanks to the fire your son kept alive. You nod at him. He nods back. No words needed, but something feels different. Not colder, though that wouldn't be surprising. No, it's quieter. You glance around, your wife is kneeling beside the cradle, cooing softly to the baby. She looks up and meets your gaze with a small smile, and something in your chest tightens. Something that has nothing to do with illness. She's still wearing the same wool dress from yesterday. Same as you. Same as always. Her hair is wrapped in a dull cloth, her cheeks wind-bitten, her fingers raw from laundry and wood chopping. And yet, she is beautiful. Or maybe you're just tired. Hard to tell, you close your eyes for a moment. Just a moment, when you open them, she's beside you now, holding out a small wooden cup of hot water steeped with dried mint leaves. It's barely more than flavored steam, but it feels like heaven. You take it, you drink, and then she leans in, lowers her voice, and whispers, "Tonight, once they're asleep." You glance over at the children, already tumbling in the corner with the dog and a goat that has absolutely no respect for personal space. You raise an eyebrow, and she grins, that grin. The one that used to mean trouble back when you were both 16 and sneaking glances behind the churchyard. You smile, and for a second, the weight in your chest lightens, because even in the cold, even wrapped in dirt and rags, there is space for something else. Something tender. Historians rarely talk about romance among peasants. Love, yes, mostly in terms of marriage contracts and fertility rates. But the quieter things. The stolen glances. The middle of the night touches beneath 5 layers of wool and children's feet. That doesn't make it into most textbooks, and yet, you know it's real, because tonight, after the fire has burned down low, and the kids have finally stopped kicking in their sleep, and even the goat has settled into a snoring lump, you will roll over. Gently. Carefully. And she will already be waiting. There is no privacy. No locked door. No soft music. Just the rhythm of the fire, the creak of the bed frame, and the hush of breath shared between 2 people who have survived another bitter day. It's not glamorous. It's not planned. And it's not always successful. Last winter, the baby woke up screaming right in the middle of things and headbutt you both in the face. You couldn't look at each other for 3 days without laughing, but when it does work, it's a reminder that you're not just bodies struggling through the cold, you're still people, still lovers, still human. You remember a bit of lore passed down from your grandmother. A shared bed makes strong children and stronger bonds. She also once said that onions cure heartbreak and that cats are witches in disguise, so take that as you will, but she wasn't wrong about this, because even under layers of smoke and hay and damp wool, when her fingers brush yours in the dark, it's like the cold outside vanishes for a little while. The ache dulls. The cough retreats. And something warm, something ancient, flickers to life. You don't need candles or perfumes, you just need to remember each other, so you finish your mint water. You touch her hand as she takes the cup. And you know. Tonight, for a moment, the cold will lose, because love lives here too, and sometimes, that's the warmest thing in the room. The next morning, you wake up feeling, well, not better, but slightly less dead inside. Which is something. The fire's still going, the baby didn't cry through the night, and you actually remember smiling before falling asleep, you even stretched a little. Until your back made a sound like someone breaking twigs in a sack, you sit up, pull the cloak around your shoulders, and glance out the tiny window slit. There's smoke rising from the miller's house. Again. Of course, that man always seems to have firewood, dry clothes, and, rumor has it, actual straw-stuffed pillows that don't collapse into itchy, wheezing piles by midwinter. It's maddening. You've known him since you were both children. He was always just a little taller, a little cleaner, a little better fed. But ever since he inherited the mill, he's basically been living in medieval luxury. You've been in there once. Just once. The stone hearth is big enough to lie inside. His family sleeps on raised wooden beds with actual linen drapes. They have bread every day. You try not to think about it too much. But some mornings, especially mornings like this, you can't help it. Your son, wrapped in a blanket like a sad burrito, grumbles from the floor. Why's the miller always warm? Because he sleeps next to the fire, son, you mutter. And the fire sleeps next to money. Historians often note that millers were among the better-off villagers. Despite being technically commoners, they controlled access to grain processing, often charged a toll in kind. A portion of your flour, usually. And they generally worked less physically than field laborers. Some were even resented as cheats. You don't know if the miller cheats. But his children wear shoes year-round. That alone feels deeply suspicious. There's also the issue of dust. You remember when he invited you to help repair a broken gear wheel. You walked in and immediately started sneezing. The whole place was covered in fine flour dust. Every surface, every breath, a cloud. His wife even had a white line on her eyebrows. And yet, warm. Always warm. You once joked that you trade your dignity for a few nights beside that giant turning wheel. He laughed. Then he paused. And you both realized you were only half joking. There's a quirky belief among your neighbors. Sleeping near turning machinery like a mill brings vivid dreams. Some say they're prophetic. Others say it's just the hum and vibration shaking up your brain. Either way, the miller swears by it. Claims he dreamt of Saint Joseph giving him the perfect gear alignment. Sure he did, but envy aside, you can't deny this. His house is the warmest in the village, and when the frost bites down, when your straw mattress collapses into soggy disappointment, when the fire sputters no matter how much dung you feed it, there's a part of you that imagines sneaking over. Curling up under that hearth. Letting the dust choke you into blissful warmth. You've never done it, of course, but you've imagined it. The village has a kind of unspoken respect for warmth. Not wealth. Not titles. Just warmth. If you found a way to hold the cold at bay, you're basically nobility. The smithy has his forge, of course. But he sleeps in a shed that feels like the inside of a tin box. The shepherd has wool, but no fire. The priest has stone walls, but no livestock. Everyone has a piece. But the miller seems to have it all. And you have your family, your threadbare cloak, your slightly charred, goat-gnawed boots, and, depending on how tonight goes, possibly your sanity. You shake the envy off like snow from your shoulders. No time for it today. There's work to be done. Always, but still, when you pass the mill later, on your way to check the frozen fields, you slow your pace. Just a little, and when the warm wind from the open grain chute wafts over you, you pause. Just for a moment. And think about what it must be like. To wake up every morning. Without shivering. You trudge through the snow toward the river with a bucket in one hand and hope in the other. The air bites harder today. Your breath hangs longer, like it doesn't want to leave you, like it's reconsidering its life choices. Fair, the river's frozen over. Again. But not just the usual skin of ice across the surface. This time, it's solid. Thick. You can walk on it. You've tested it. Everyone has, and that means one thing, it's ice fair season. You stop at the edge, bucket forgotten for a moment. The village is already there. Children sliding across the glassy surface on planks tied to their feet, like crude skates. Vendors setting up rough wooden stalls on the far side. Someone dragging a barrel of hot ale on a sledge. Like a hero of winter. And at the center of it all, the wide, frozen expanse of the river. Flat, shimmering, and completely unnatural, because water isn't supposed to do this. Historians trace the rise of Europe's Little Ice Age back to roughly the 14th century, when winters grew colder and longer. Some years, rivers like the Thames and the Seine froze entirely. The ice grew thick enough to support not just foot traffic but entire fairs, complete with markets, music, games, and even makeshift pubs built right on the surface. It was both terrifying and beautiful. You remember the first time you saw it as a child. The disbelief that something so deep could freeze. The fear of falling through. The wonder of people turning a death trap into a party. That's the medieval way, really. Turn disaster into distraction, you make your way onto the ice. Carefully. Always carefully. Your boots scrape. Your balance wobbles. The wind whips across the surface like it's trying to erase you. A man skates past. More like glides with purpose on two long metal strips tied to his boots. A blacksmith made them, supposedly. He's showing off. He spins once and nearly crashes into a hay cart being used as a tea stand. Everyone cheers. You spot the baker's boy juggling apples near the fire barrel. Two kids are throwing snowballs at each other with war crime level intensity. Someone's dog keeps slipping and barking in confusion. It's madness, but it's warm madness, not in temperature, obviously. Your nose is basically gone. But there's a feeling, like the cold has been claimed today. Not endured. Not merely survived. Owned. Transformed. You walk along the stalls. They're selling roasted chestnuts. Where did they even get those? Wool socks. Blessed. And one woman is literally frying eels on a hot stone like this is a normal Tuesday. You buy a bit of bread. Slightly stale, but warm. It costs more than it should. You hand over a few coins with fingers that don't quite bend anymore. Worth it, a quirky fact, some ice fairs had printed souvenirs. Printed, on actual press machines brought out onto the river. Messages like I survived the frost fair of 1608 or God save us from this frozen flood. It's both charming and completely insane. You wonder if anyone would bother printing your face on parchment. Probably not. You sit on a log bench someone dragged out from who knows where. You chew your bread slowly, watching villagers skate by with that mix of grace and mild panic. You smile, then the ice creaks, not a lot. Just once, long, low, everyone stops, no one breathes, you can hear the goat's bell from the riverbank. That's how quiet it gets. Then a child laughs. One of the village elders mutters, just settling, and the fair resumes with exaggerated energy, as if noise can convince the ice to stay solid. It usually does, but not always. You remember a few winters back. The year the ice broke beneath the blacksmith's son. He didn't fall through. Not all the way. But his leg snapped. Clean. They carried him home like a broken marionette. He limps now. Walks with a stick, so today, you stay near the edge, you enjoy the show, the laughter, the illusion of safety. But your boots stay close to land, because you know better. You throw your last crust of bread to the dog, who catches it with a triumphant bark and immediately slips sideways. Everyone laughs. He doesn't care. The sun begins to dip. Not that it ever really rose. The world just went from dark to slightly less dark. Shadows lengthen. The stalls start packing up. Children are herded back to warmth. You take one last look at the wide, Strange River turned into a celebration, and you walk home slowly, your fingers stiff, your heart a little lighter, because for a few brief hours, winter wasn't something to fight, it was something to play on. That night, you wake up shivering again, but this time it's not because your blanket slipped off, it's because snow has crept inside your home. You blink, disoriented, staring up into the rafters. There's a strange glitter in the air, tiny flakes drifting down like they forgot they weren't invited. You reach out and touch the edge of your bed. It's damp. The floor crunches slightly underfoot when you shift. There's a thin, unmistakable layer of snow across your sleeping area. Inside, you sigh, not the exasperated sigh of someone dealing with inconvenience. It's the bone-deep sigh of someone who's just realized that their roof is officially having a midlife crisis. You get up slowly, careful not to wake the others. Your breath fogs in the dark. You glance toward the roof. The thatch has slipped in one section. Wind must have pushed snow sideways through the exposed slats. It's not a hole, exactly. More like a very insistent draft with a sense of humor. You reach for a patch cloth and wedge it into place, pinning it with a wooden spoon. It holds, for now. You dust the snow from the corner of the bed and the floor around it, gathering a small mound of cold fluff and tossing it toward the hearth. It sizzles softly. Even snow knows not to mess with fire, a quirky fact. It wasn't uncommon for medieval houses to get dusted with snow during deep winter, especially in cottages with poorly thatched roofs. No ceilings, and walls made more of hope than engineering. People sometimes woke up with snow on their blankets, hair, even eyebrows. Historians still debate how peasants truly endured such exposure. Was it as widespread as tales suggest? Or did only the poorest live in such drafty structures? Either way, the reality is that if snow wants to come inside, it usually does. You toss more kindling onto the fire. It flares up, and shadows flicker over the wooden beams above. You notice a small drip forming near the far corner of the ceiling. Wonderful. The melt has already begun. You wrap your cloak tighter, sit back on the bench, and wait. Not for morning. Just for the cold to recede a little. Just enough to sleep again. Your wife stirs, mumbles something about the goat sneaking onto the sleeping mat again. You hush her gently. Just the wind, love, you whisper. And a little snow. She doesn't open her eyes. Tell it to go outside, she mutters, then rolls over. You smile. The humor of exhaustion. The children are still asleep, breathing steadily beneath their layered coverings of wool, old linen, and hay-stuffed padding. You envy their ability to sleep through anything, blizzards, livestock, snow falling directly on their faces. You remember a story your grandfather used to tell. A family once woke up buried in snow after a storm, completely insulated, their house invisible under white. They lived like rabbits in a winter burrow until the thaw. You never believed it, until tonight. You glance toward the window. The light outside has a strange glow, moonlight reflected off an ocean of snow. Everything beyond the cottage has been erased, replaced with shifting drifts and silence. It's beautiful, in the way that only dangerous things can be. You walk back to your bed. You shake out the blanket. A few flakes cling stubbornly. You don't bother brushing them off. They'll melt eventually. You lie back down, tucking yourself between the cold and the warmth. The fire crackles quietly. The snow outside shifts again with a faint sigh, and for the first time, you notice something odd. You're not angry, you're not even surprised, you're just tired, and quietly impressed by the stubbornness of winter. It always finds a way in through walls, through roofs, under doors. It seeps, curls, whispers, and still, you sleep, because you have to, because even with snow on your blanket and frost on your eyelashes, sleep is the most rebellious thing you can do. You close your eyes, and drift off, not beneath a roof, but beneath a sky that forgot to stay outside. The sound wakes you first. Not harsh, no scream, no creak, no cough, just a soft drip. Repeated. Rhythmic. Like a heartbeat with a cold, you lie still for a moment, blinking up at the rafters, where snow has recently staged its coup. But something's changed. The light is different. Warmer, somehow. There's no sun streaming in, since the medieval sky rarely offers that luxury, but there's a distinct shift in the tone of the gray. Less cruel. More patient. You sit up. Slowly. Everything in your body clicks and grinds into place, but not as angrily as yesterday. The blanket slips off your shoulder, and for the first time in weeks, it doesn't hurt to breathe the air. You shuffle to the door. You don't bother with boots, not yet. You need to see it for yourself. When you crack the door open, it groans, but less than usual. And outside, the village has changed. Just slightly. But you see it. You feel it. The snow is melting, not in a grand, rushing thaw. It's a soft, hesitant shift, edges slumping, icicles thinning, the top layer of snow turning from sharp white to dull gray. You step outside, barefoot for just a moment, and the packed earth beneath the snow gives a little when you shift your weight, and there it is again. That sound, drip, from the edge of the thatch, from the trough beneath the eaves, from every surface that held winter a little too tightly. Drip. Drip. Drip, hope, in slow motion. Historians often record the arrival of spring in poetic terms, the return of the birds, the breaking of the river ice, the first green shoots pushing through brown fields. But before all that, there's this. The sound of change. The melt is quiet, modest, even reluctant. But to a peasant in winter's grip, it's the music of deliverance. You close your eyes and let the air wash over you. It still carries cold, but not the kind that hates you. Not the kind that steals your sleep or threatens your toes. This is a gentler chill, a leaving kind of cold. You head back inside, smiling a little. And that's when you feel it. Your joints don't ache as much. Your knees bend without protest. Even your cough, still present and still raspy, seems to have lost its edge. You sit by the fire. The coals are low. You don't mind. You don't need them like before. The children are still asleep, cheeks pink and relaxed. Your wife is curled into the blanket, hair loose across her shoulder. The dog twitches in a dream. You swear he's smiling. You eat a bit of oat bread for breakfast. It's dry. Crumbly. But it doesn't taste like survival anymore. It tastes like routine. Outside, neighbors begin to stir. You hear boots crunching, water sloshing from half-melted barrels. A shout. Laughter. Actual laughter. It bubbles up like the thaw itself, hesitant at first, then spilling over. You stand again and step outside, this time with boots. You pass the smithy. His forge is roaring already. He nods at you, his face slick with sweat, though the air is still crisp. You pass the well. It's dripping, the frost around its edges turning to slush. You walk to the edge of the field, and there, in the snow-crusted mud, you see it, green, a tiny, stubborn shoot, pushing its head up into the world. Frail. Foolish. Absolutely doomed if the cold returns. But also brave, a quirky belief. The first blade of spring grass seen in winter is lucky. Touch it and you'll have a strong harvest. Kiss it and you'll have a child. Step on it and, well, bad things. You don't take the chance. You kneel carefully and press a finger to its side. It's real, and alive, and that means something inside you wakes up, too. You walk home slower. You notice things now, how the snow on your roof has slipped into curls like pastry dough. How the barn door doesn't creak as much. How the chickens are pecking at the thawed patches of dirt, complaining less than usual, and you realize something strange. You made it, not in some grand, glorious fashion. No fanfare. No feast. Just one day at a time. One breath. One ember. One layer of wool. One freezing, aching, coughing night followed by another, until now, until this moment, when your home is still standing, when your feet still work, when the snow has begun to run like water again, you walk back inside and see your wife smiling from across the room. You smile back, and for the first time in months, it doesn't feel like pretending. You'd think that with the snow retreating, the hardest part of winter would be over. And in some ways, yes, it is. Your fingertips no longer go numb while lacing your boots. The air no longer feels like it's cutting through your bones like a spiteful knife. And best of all, you woke up this morning and didn't see your breath, miraculous. But now comes something else, the reckoning. You sit on a wooden bench outside your cottage, letting the sun, actual sun, touch your face. It feels warm, which is odd. You almost forgot what warmth felt like when it came from above. The thatch above your door droops a little with meltwater. Icicles drip steadily along the eaves like slow applause. And from this small throne of splinters and creaks, you survey what winter has left behind, the fence. Buckled. One section collapsed entirely under snow weight. The gate no longer swings. It sort of limps. The barn leans at a slight, suspicious angle. The water barrel is cracked along one side. The chicken coop's roof is a gaping mouth, you sigh. The kind of sigh that makes birds reconsider perching near you. You take mental notes. Repairs. Reinforcements. Restuffing the mattress. Drying every blanket in the smokehouse. Patching the boots. Mending the goat pen before she escapes again and eats your only remaining rope. Spring doesn't bring rest. It brings the to-do list winter kept hidden under the snow. Your neighbor walks by. Henrik, missing 2 toes and half a mustache thanks to last year's frost, nods solemnly. Still got your eyebrows, he mutters. It's the local way of saying, you survived, you nod back. And you've still got your tongue, you reply, equally poetic. Historians often highlight the resilience of medieval peasants, and they're not wrong. But it wasn't just physical resilience. It was emotional. Winter doesn't just freeze fingers. It freezes perspective. You stop dreaming. You stop thinking beyond today. Everything contracts into one question: how do I get through the next night? And now, that question's changed, not into ease, into forward. You take a walk through the village. Everyone else is doing the same. Quiet inspections. Gentle murmurs. No one's cheering. No one's dancing. But there's movement. And movement is hope. You pass old Marta's house. She didn't make it. Her door is ajar, a black ribbon tied to the beam. Her niece has already moved in. Sorting firewood and whispering to the chickens like they understand grief. You bow your head as you pass, because even in survival, there is loss. You lost something too. A cousin. A sheep. 3 jars of pickled onions you were definitely saving for a special occasion. Your joints ache in ways they didn't before. Your beard's gone a little grayer. And your dreams, when they come, are of warm soil and sun, not snow. Back at your house, your daughter's brushing the goat with a bunch of dried grass. The goat is unimpressed but tolerates it. You watch her for a moment, marveling at how children treat winter like a bad joke they've already forgotten. You glance down at your hands. Cracked, still. But steady. Your nails are stained from ash and soot. Your fingertips are toughened from rope and splinters. You flex them once. Still working, a quirky belief around here. The first day you can go outside without a cloak is a day to make an offering. To the land, to the saints, to the spirits, you choose. You place a bit of bread on a stump. Or some herbs. Or just a psalm, whispered toward the sky. So you do. You break off a piece of your midday crust, coarser than usual, and place it on the stone near the field's edge. You press a hand to the cold ground and whisper, "Thanks for not swallowing us." It's not poetic, but it's honest. You head back to the house. Inside, your wife is cleaning the hearth, sweeping out ashes with a bundle of twigs. It's like watching someone tidy a battlefield. "We'll need more peat," she says, not looking up. You nod. "And more everything else." She smiles. The smallest twitch at the corner of her mouth. The fire is down to coals again. But the house doesn't feel cold, not like before. You sit, stretch your legs, and glance toward the window. Outside, the snow is receding, revealing more earth. More mud. More mess, but also, more future, because winter tried. It came with its teeth bared and its silence heavy, but you're still here, blankets ragged, hands calloused, fire stubborn, and that is enough. You lie in bed again, not from illness, not from exhaustion. Just because you can. The fire is still going, the house is quiet, and for the first time in what feels like a century, you're not shivering. You lie there and let the stillness wrap around you. Not the stillness of winter, which is sharp and hollow and echoing. This is the stillness of survival. Of something having ended. Of something new not yet begun. Your wife is beside you, humming softly while stitching a torn sleeve. The baby gurgles in her lap, playing with a piece of straw like it's the finest toy ever made. The older children are outside, sloshing through wet earth, laughing as they chase the dog. Even the goat sounds content. You shift under the blanket. It's still rough, still patched, but now dry. Warm. Familiar. You tuck your hands behind your head and stare up at the beams. They're holding. You can't help but marvel at that. The roof didn't cave in. The walls didn't crumble. Your own body, despite its coughing fits and creaking joints, didn't give up. The days were cruel. The nights were worse. But somehow, you outlasted them. Historians will write about empires. About kings and knights and revolts and treaties. But they'll forget this. The miracle of not being broken by the cold. They won't remember your name. But the field will. The hearth will. The walls that held fast. The child you kept warm. The fire you fed when your hands were shaking. The life that flickered and refused to go out. Outside, a bird sings, just one note. Clear. Delicate, you blink, startled. Then you smile. You can't remember the last time you heard birdsong. You sit up, slowly. The firelight dances on the floor, soft and orange. You breathe in. There's still smoke in the air. Still goat. But also earth. Dampness. A promise. Planting season is coming. The fields will need tending. The tools sharpened. The thatch replaced. You'll be sore again, and blistered again, and grumbling before the sun rises. But all that's later. Tonight is yours. The family settles. Your wife leans against you, her head on your shoulder. You wrap your cloak around her. The baby falls asleep with a small sigh. Your eldest is drawing shapes in the soot by the hearth. The youngest is snoring softly, nose first in a hay pillow. It's not perfect, it never is, but it's enough. You made it through the freeze, and now, after all the nights you thought you wouldn't. After all the dark hours spent counting firewood, counting breaths, counting your toes. You finally get to rest, to breathe, to simply be. So now, the cold has softened, the snow has begun to vanish into the thirsty earth, the fire burns low. Not in desperation, but in comfort, and you lie still beneath your patchwork blankets, letting your body remember what not suffering feels like. Your muscles unwind, like coiled ropes loosened at last. Your breath comes easier now, slower, deeper. Outside, the wind no longer screams. It hums, the trees creak gently, as if stretching after a long hibernation. Somewhere in the village, someone is singing. A lullaby, maybe. Or a prayer disguised as melody. You don't need to know the words, your thoughts drift, to spring, to seedlings pushing through thawed soil, to the feel of dirt beneath your nails instead of frostbite creeping through your soles, to your children running barefoot again. Laughing at things that don't hurt, to warmth, not just the warmth of flame, but of life returning. You let your eyes close now. You're safe here. For tonight, the fire will watch for you, the walls will hold, and if the wind knocks, let it knock. You don't need to answer, not tonight, you rest, you've survived, you're home, sleep well.